Good morning. Welcome back, and apologies for that unusually long break. We're fixing a few challenges we're witnessing in the morning. I'm still in studio with Irungu Nyakera, former Principal Secretary Planning and also Transport. I'm also with Alex Rithi from the Institute of Social Accountability and Chachi Lugutu from IC. And we had started to talk about, or we were starting to talk about, a conversation that has been in the headlines the past few days of the passage of the privatization law that now guides the process of how national or public assets should be sold in the country. Alex, talk to us about what issues you have with the law.
Thank you, Sam. The issues with the law are not mine. They are Kenyans.
For sure.
And they are fundamental. One of them is the fact that the valuation of the assets that are to be privatized is left to the authority, and there is no express mention of the role of the Auditor General, who is supposed to carry out some of these roles when it comes to public entities as provided for in Article 229 of the Constitution. In our view, the Auditor General should play a critical role when it comes to the valuation of these assets. Right now, it will be the authority that determines who does the valuation. Secondly, privatization is one of the processes through which government assets can be disposed. And we know the law that governs assets disposal in government is the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act. In this regard, it has not been mentioned anywhere. And we find that there will be a conflict of laws when you have the Privatization Act, and then we have the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act, which has not been referred to in this regard. Ordinarily, what you have, if you have a superior law, you refer to it when you have another law that intends to work under it. A good example would be the Public Finance Act. When it comes to all public finance issues, it supersedes any other law, and therefore you're supposed to make reference to it. In this case, we've not seen that. The other issue is the fact that even the board, the chair of the board of this authority is to be appointed by the president. Then the cabinet secretary will appoint, I think, 6 other members. So technically, you have a very huge role of the executive when it comes to even determining who sits on the board and who authorizes some of this privatization. Then the cabinet secretary is supposed to come up with a privatization program, which Parliament approves, but beyond that, Cabinet has the full discretion of the method they are going to use for privatization. Then finally, Section 21 of this particular law provides for public consultations. But we are all aware that currently in our country we do not have a legislation on public participation. And it is not clear how adequate public participation is going to be defined as far as Section 21 of this Act is concerned. All these bring up issues that are legal, but then we have the age-old ethical question in our country, which is not legal, it's not economic at this point, the beneficial ownership of the entities that we have in our space. Kenyans are asking who is going to buy into these entities that are to be privatized. Could we have a possibility where we are running down some of our companies so that they become available for privatization? Yes. And then we've just seen this act passing through the circumstances it passed and how it was signed, which I don't want to get into. And immediately it comes up, and we've not even seen it, the final one being published as to when it commences. We have now seen the Ministry of Wildlife and Tourism has now put up, I think, some islands and some beaches for privatization. We've had the Kenya pipeline ongoing and the other 13 that were mentioned some times back. So one wonders, were we, or had we already planned that we are going to do some of these things, and the only thing that was in our way was a law. And now we have hurriedly passed it and made sure that it is signed in the circumstances it was signed, so that then we remove this blockade.
So if it can be abused?
That is our view, that there is a possibility of it being abused. Also look at the fact that some of these assets that we are privatizing also sit on huge tracts of land, the Kenya pipeline. And Article 62 of the Constitution provides that for public land, the National Land Commission has to approve when it's being disposed or anything is being done to it. But we do not see reference to the National Land Commission in this act.
I'll get to you for more insights based on what you've just said. But Churchill, do you have any issue with the law as it is?
Thanks for having me. I think if we are looking at the privatization law 2025, it came in to cure what were the gaps that were there in Privatization Act 2023 that eventually was thrown out. But two things stood out when that law was expanded. One was the issue around public participation, because it was noted that there were just public entities that were involved during that public participation process. Remarkably, this time round, we saw that it was quite vibrant, that public participation. Alex has mentioned what public participation actually entails. So that, I tend to agree with him. But nonetheless, you saw the committee of that was dealing with this public privatization bill. They actually, the committee on public debt and privatization, and also the Finance and National Planning Committee, they had a robust public participation during this stage. But nonetheless, what is that threshold that needs to count in that? The other issue that now led to the throwing away of the previous law was now to do with the overall of the overriding factor from the executive. There wasn't oversight from the National Assembly. So at least this time round, we are seeing that there's some oversight from the National Assembly, but potentially there's more that needs to be done.
All right, Irungu, you have any concerns, or it's a great piece of legislation?
No, thank you, Sam. I think for me, I completely agree with Alex and Churchill on the issues, on the key concerns. The key concerns around the public participation is weak public participation. The issues of potential abuse because of the short window for oversight by the Parliament, and also I feel that Treasury has such a big role. It's both the seller and the regulator. But I also feel that it's about time that a new act was put in place. Certainly, I'm not a supporter of this administration or government, but I do support this Privatization Act. I feel that it allows for more speed and efficiency in privatizations. If you look at the Privatization Commission that was there from 2008, because it came after the Safaricom IPO, they've actually not done anything. They've not been able to implement anything for a period of 17 years. Actually, the only thing they did was in 2014, they did the Distel, the sale of Qual shares to Distel of South Africa. Beyond that, they've not. And I used to sit with the CEO back then, Solomon Kitungu, and he was telling me that his hands were tied. There was too much bureaucracy that was allowed in that, the 2003 Act. And also, even in funding, there was actually absolutely no funds that are coming to the Privatization Commission. But you see that with the new Act, we actually have a privatization authority that is funded directly through the national budgeting process. And then, if you look at the areas of the transparency, it comes in through the independent valuations that are supposed to be done, and there are significant penalties, even jail time, to the valuers and transaction advisors who offer the wrong kind of valuation. And finally, in terms of fiscal discipline, see in the previous one, the Act, the 2003 Act, the Minister for Finance or the Treasury would set up what they used to call a privatization fund, and the privatization fund then will be money that goes there, even after the Safaricom IPO, the money will be appropriated by the ministry and the government, independent of parliament and oversight. But in the current act, the funds explicitly are supposed to go into the consolidation fund. And so once the funds go into consolidation fund, it means that it has to be appropriated through the parliamentary process. Yeah. So while it is not 100%, and we'll never get anything to be 100%, I feel that it is a move in the right direction from where we were. Okay. And the risks, which we'll talk about in terms of how it could be abused, and I feel that it is being abused in the KPC issue. But generally, it still remains a good law.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it remains a good law. Now, Alex, you raised an issue with the mode of appointment to the authority. CS to appoint 6 persons. The law says competitively. You don't like that? What would be the alternative?
Competitively in this country has an interesting meaning, but far from that, given the magnitude of the issues that we are talking about here, we would have expected at least to have at least the chair of this committee to go through a parliamentary approval process. It is not just the executive that is involved in coming up with this commission. Mm-hmm. Right now it is the chair being appointed by the president, and then the CS appoints the other 6 competitively. All these people should have, if we have PSs going through that vetting and CSs and everybody else, why not somebody or a group of people who are supposed to handle these very sensitive matters? Some of these entities, they are a national pride for our country. And some of them are critical assets, like the Kenya pipeline, given that we are a net importer of oil. You can imagine what would happen if we have challenges in the manner that these entities are managed. Then the whole economy would crumble. So we would want a more open process. When you look at even what is provided for in Section 65 of this Act, it provides for confidentiality of any information that is sought by the authority. Mm-hmm. So these sort of, even if you have Section 21 that provides for consultation, then you have Section 65 that says any information sought by the authority will be confidential. This, in my view, contravenes Article 35 of the Constitution on access to information, and also Article 10, 118, and so on public participation. So you have one section saying this, then another section contravening the same. So that's where we're having some doubts as to...
The reason I'm asking that question is in other very contentious issues like electoral management, you find that the law is that there will be a selection panel that comes in vets applications. The selection panel is comprised, so you have different membership. Is it the Law Society of Kenya? Is it the majority and minority parties? Is it the political parties liaison committee? Is it ISPAC constituting the selection panel to invite applications? Here it just says competitive. It doesn't say who does that. Is it the Public Service Commission? Is it a different entity? That's what I'm asking. What would you want to see? Is it representation of different institutions, or is perhaps clarification of what the competitive process should be?
Using the example that you've used of IEBC, a process like that gives you some sense of involvement of a wider range of people. In this case, we can just say the board is constituted by 2 individuals or 2 offices. That is the president and the cabinet secretary. But we don't know the process that these people go through. That should be made clear so that we see who gets to participate in the coming up of the names that will eventually be in this authority. Will they go through like a parliamentary approval or something like that? Even the initial selection or the competitive process that we are seeing here. The CS, in my view, can actually put together a small team from his office and do interviews and then bring them. They will say that there was an application, myself, Irungu here, and Churchill, we apply, we go through an interview process, and then there will be documentation and all that. That is competitive. But how open is it who gets to provide their views as to credibility of Alex, for instance, to join that particular committee? Could I be having some conflict of interest in terms of my other commercial interests? Those are issues that need to be clarified, so that then the fear that Kenyans have that we are using this process of privatization for us to have some of these entities getting into some hands of some people, that fear should be removed. Yeah.
Now, Irungu, you've been there as a principal secretary, and I think there's a time, was it about in the final term of President Uhuru Kenyatta, where several appointments to state corporations were quashed by the courts on the question of being competitive, and said that it should actually now be competitive. We haven't seen much of that even when it comes to recruitment into boards. But ideally, if the law says that in a competitive manner, what does the ministry understand it to mean, and how do you execute it?
I think generally, unless it is put in law, in a competitive manner means the president looks for his friends and puts them there. If you look at an organization like KENHA it has positions, says that the minister will appoint from 2, and then it says one has to be from a professional body, and then architecture authority and all this, and then the other one is from road users associations or something. So it gives guidelines as to where do you source these people. And so I completely agree with Alex. If you don't actually have that stipulated, then you will really just get the president appointing his friends or the people who he feels that he can work with to move things in a certain way. And given how significant this privatization authority will be, given that we put all our national resources and assets that some of sovereignty value and significance, then having puppets in that board then does not do any justice to the Kenyans.
And Churchill, there was an issue that Alex had raised about the place of the Auditor General. Well, ideally, in this country, unless there's a request for special audit, you find the Auditor General coming in after the fact. So if it's financial year 2025, 2026, those are issues that are happening currently, but the auditor will have sight of this after June 2026. How would we utilize that office, whose role is to safeguard the value for money for the public? How do we utilize it, knowing that once you privatize, when you go through all the motions and you go to the initial public offering, even if the Auditor General finds a fault, it's very difficult to reverse the entire process.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, the Auditor General comes at the tail end of the financial year. And so far, if we might want to speak for the specific case for Kenya Pipeline, we have the audited results as of June 2025. We still haven't, as of June 2024, we still haven't seen the results as of June 2025, even amidst this process of the privatization. So obviously, the Auditor General, the office, has to wait until the end of the financial year, and then probably within 3 months or whatever the timeline that is there, before now they can be able to give us the audited results for that financial year. So they come in at the point of, it's like a mortician in a way, just coming to see, okay, this is what happened during this period, and this is what was the outcome. Similar with any auditor, they come in at that point. So in terms of valuation, probably, and this is where we think of what will happen in the future. Because if you talk about valuation, if you think about it in terms of the capital markets lingo, it's basically looking at these projected cash flows that will be coming in from this business over this number of years. And then you sort of now bring those projected cash flows that will be coming, say, 2027, 2028, 2029, and bringing them all to the present value. So that's pretty much the valuation that the Privatization Commission is speaking to. In as much as that sessional paper was quite light, because it spoke of some valuation in the order of 100 billion, But that is not to be confused with the financial results of the Auditor General. When you talk about the Auditor General, it's just giving the financial statement snapshot as of the end of that financial period. But the valuation is now looking at the future prospects and sort of now valuing it at the present. What is the value of all these future prospects as it is? We know the business of Kenya Pipeline, distribution of oil, and what is the future. So we've seen from the Auditor General results, the dividends, because government of Kenya was solely owning Kenya Pipeline Company, and each and every financial year, Kenya Pipeline will now reimburse the dividends to government of Kenya, which will now get into the revenues for the government. So in this case, we are sort of, if you look at valuation, it's like, okay, from this point in time, as of June 2024, Kenya Pipeline's profit was 6.9 billion. So it's like looking at all those future profits from June 2026. I don't know whether the calendar year will change, financial year will change for Kenya Pipeline, and sort of discounting to the present and now saying, okay, this is the valuation. Could be 100 billion from what you've heard from sessional paper, or could be another value. So that is where, as far as the law is stated, is that they need transaction advisors when they come up with the prospectus. That's when they say, okay, this is the valuation of the company. So the Auditor General, as far as the role is mandated, is now to look like the financial aspects in a backward-looking basis, but now for the purposes of valuation is a forward-looking basis. That's the difference.
So let me ask, because then you have the authority that is the one overseeing this. It recruits the transaction advisor, right?
Absolutely.
The transaction advisor does the valuation and advises them and tells them this is how much you think this asset is valued at, and this is what you should sell it at, perhaps. So do we need another layer of oversight for our confidence, or we are too suspicious?
I think if the audited results, even up until June 2025, and also from the management accounts from the Kenya Pipeline Company, they may say, okay, from the next couple of years, you want to do this and this, and that's where that will be incorporated into the valuation. And then they come with a figure. So I think that will be sufficient enough, and then the market decide, okay, will this value or this price, is it the right price or the wrong price? So that is where the market will decide. Because ideally, when we are looking at the privatization model, and the law actually speaks of 3 privatization, how you can be able to privatize. You can publicly float the shares, and that is the route that Kenya Pipeline is going through. You can also do a public tender of whatever that is there, or you can do exercising the preemptive rights. So to allay some of the fears that were there, and this is something that you saw in the period of 1992 to 2002, whereby the prospects or the routes of privatization primarily was through exercising of preemptive shares rights. And what do I mean by that? Is whereby GOK, as it was divesting out of these state-owned entities, it was now looking at some of the shareholders who had minority stake in those companies and now selling to them. That is where it's a big concern if you look at the route of privatization, and that was quite vibrant during that period. But at least if you get through the public IPO route, that's where you offer to the likes of Irungu, Alex, some that opportunity to be able to participate if the price makes sense to them. So from the perspective of the IPO and all this valuation, I think as far as it is concerned, if the valuation is right, if it's based on the proper audited results from the Attorney General, from the Auditor General at this point in time, the management accounts, looking at the prospective, because we need to look at going forward, what are the prospects of this business? Do they want to extend it to another country? Do they want to look at other diversifying source of revenue? So what are the prospects? And now baking into the valuation, and this, if it makes right, I think people might participate through the IPO.
Okay. Now, I know you may want to respond, but perhaps...
Actually, I wanted to respond to the Auditor General one that Alex had talked about.
Yes. Let me hear from Irungu first. But also, if this asset is sold, and money is received by the government, is there any limit or any regulation of how those resources should be used, or do they just go into the kitty to finance whatever it is the government wants to?
Okay, thank you, Sam. I think first, if I just talk about the role of the Auditor General, see, in the previous law, the 2003, the issue I mentioned about the issue of bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy is bringing in too many people up front at the beginning, which then either slows the process of even compromises and does not see the whatever we wanted does not see light of day. But if you think of it, you see, I've been chairman, I've been peers, I've been the parastators.
Yep.
Anything that you do, you always think of the paper trail. You always know that the Auditor General will come to look at it after the fact. Whether it's after the fact, it really does not matter, because in your mind, you know that the Auditor General will come. Yeah, so you have to do it in the right way, especially now that the Auditor General has been given that power. In the current law, the Auditor General is allowed to actually verify the valuations at the end. Verify the valuation, verify the transaction process, and even look at how much of the funds went into the consolidated kitty, which is really the government, and also look at any issues of compliance. Were there anything that was done during the process that actually did not meet the legal threshold? Then from there, the Auditor General is supposed to report to Parliament. With this new law, they've actually introduced an element for prosecution on criminal charges for transaction advisors. If a transaction advisor misleads the public on issues of either low valuation, undervaluation of the asset sale, issues of not disclosing the conflicts of interest, then they actually can be charged for up to 5 years in court and blacklisted by privatization authority, and even that transaction can be cancelled by the privatization authority if actually is deemed that it did not go through the right process. So in my view, the Auditor General should not be introduced at any other level. I think where they are is actually the right level, where they look at the process after the fact, and then and everybody is aware of that. When you look at the...
But just before we move away from that point, because how the Auditor General works is that the report is taken to Parliament.
Yes.
Parliament debates it and takes a vote.
Yes.
How do you secure that process, which can also be very political?
It could be political, but you know, facts are stubborn. If the numbers are clear, the funds that you sold something for 120 billion, but you only put in 100 billion into the consolidated fund, you really have no way to defend that. So there are things that could be debated on. Was the process irregular? Was it which could be influenced politically? But at least not 100%. You have 90%.
But you know, we live in this country, and on several occasions, the Auditor General has been very firm on the findings.
Yes.
But MPs have a way of explaining those things.
Yes.
And
but not
defeating
anchored.
some reports.
Not anchored in law. You see now, that role has been anchored. You see, like, for example, the Eurobond issue. Which the Auditor General, the OUCO, had been very, spoke about the funds did not reach the consolidated fund. Not all the funds. But you see, there was a provision for the funds to be deposited to a different account. But you see now, with this new law, it actually says other than the 1 to 2% fees that the privatization authority can keep, every other money actually goes into the consolidated fund. And then now the funds now can be utilized in a different, in line with the normal parliamentary and budgetary provisions. So it actually, what we have is that the paper trail. So the Auditor General is actually, the role of an auditor is coming in to audit what has been done. Okay,
let me explain what I'm saying. If you look at the law, you do not see any mention of the Auditor General, do you?
You do.
Where? Which section?
The Auditor General comes at the end.
Yes.
Show me in the law the mention of the Auditor General, because I don't find it myself.
It is there. It's actually at the end, as I said, because that's the which is specific with those specific functions. I think you can see which section. But yeah, actually the difference between this law and the previous is actually that the Auditor General is actually brought in with a function, and even to report to Parliament on confirming that the transactions, the valuations was right, the audit process was done right, the funds have been moved to the consolidated fund, and there's full compliance with the process.
You see, Sam, the challenge that we are having with this process is, and Churchill had alluded to that, the valuation of an asset is both the financial and maybe the financial possession and any other assets that that entity has. And therefore, as far as Article 229 of the Constitution is concerned, the only person who has the authority to tell us this is the actual final possession of this entity is the Auditor General. So in my view, before we proceed with the process of saying we are selling item X and it is valued at this much, the position of the Auditor General should come first. Then afterwards, then the auditing of how the process was carried out, did we have a competitive process, and so on and so forth, comes after the fact. But before that process even begins, we should know the actual position of that particular entity. And this brings me to what is provided for in Section 43 of this law, which provides that Cabinet has the full discretion of the method they are going to choose to use in terms of privatization. And in subsection 2, it actually says that all such other method determined by the Cabinet. So other than the IPO and the others that Churchill had mentioned, Cabinet can come up with another method that is not even prescribed here, and it will be seen to be okay. Now, relate this with what is provided for in Section 10 in terms of constitution of the board. If now Cabinet decides that we are not going to do IPO, we are not going to do these others that are provided for, and then we come up with another method that is approved by Cabinet.
Like a direct sale?
Like a direct sale or whatever it is. Because when you say such other method determined by Cabinet, it leaves the whole world open. So those other nice methods that Churchill had even indicated that public, Alex can buy and all that, we can disregard all those, and Cabinet says, for this one, we think let us just sell it to Sam, for instance. And it's approved. And then we go on.
Give me the money.
So because of course, Cabinet will come up with justification, we need to do this, there will be a proper justification. And then the law provides that Cabinet can actually have discretion. Now, look at this and the fact that even the valuation in Section 45, even appointment of the valuer is given to the authority. They are the ones who are going to say X person is the one who is going to do the valuation. We are already seeing conflict of interest starting from appointment of the board, the method of privatization, the appointment of the valuer, so all across. And then very little oversight by both the Auditor General and Parliament.
No, you didn't answer my question though. Do you find any mention of the auditor? Because I don't. The Auditor General is not mentioned anywhere in that law. And therefore, even if they can execute their mandate based on the Constitution and the Act that establishes or explains the establishment, it will still be taken through Parliament, isn't it, Churchill? And Parliament can disagree with the auditor. They have before, haven't they?
Yes, but what entities are audited by the Auditor General? I mean, these are the state corporations. But the moment whereby a privatization has already happened, you find now the stake of the Auditor General probably kind of ceases, and then we now look at private-based auditors now coming into the picture. Because now the management, because ideally with the privatization, the ownership or management or combination of both changes, and in this case we are seeing the government of Kenya releasing up to 65% stake of its ownership stake in this particular entity. So that means that even probably the management, the board will change.
Yeah.
And that also means that even the audits will be conducted by a private sector player. So right now, the best shot is at least before the prospectus is put out, the Auditor General probably might now have to publicize the audits as of June 2025, because we have a process up until March whereby we can see for the particular case of Kenya Pipeline, that's where the Privatization Commission has stated that the IPO will be completed by that point in time.
Yeah.
But even as we speak about that, we need to look at what are the historical. We can't rely on June 2024 financials. Yeah. At the very best, we need to have sight of June 2025 financials. That's where the Auditor General will come in. And then subsequent to that, that's what will be incorporated within the valuation. But then after it has been privatized, we now see the other private sector audits coming in place, but not the Auditor General.
No, I hear you. I mean, once it becomes a private entity, it's the mandate of a different authority.
Yeah.
But securing the interests of the public up until the point of sale, that is not very safeguarded when it comes to involvement of the Auditor General, because the oversight there is just about the authority itself and the authority filing reports with Parliament. And you know what can happen in Parliament, especially majority versus minority sort of politics.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with that. And we've seen instances whereby a whole host of Auditor General reports being put out there, specifically for the individual state corporations, but we never see detailed analysis from the individual reports, other than the one that is normally the Public Investment Committee report, which sorts of does overview of all the state corporations. At that point is whereby we can be able to have some visibility from the Public Investment Corporation Committee report. And if I may take you back to the case of 2007, the Safaricom issue. And if you remember correctly, Safaricom used to be came about when Vodafone came into the picture, and now Telcom was the main, after the bundling of Kenya Post and Telecommunication Corporation. And then there was one of the entities was Telcom, and then Telcom partnered with Vodafone. That's where Safaricom came about. But also there was, in the run-up to the IPO, there was also the issue about Mobitelia, whereby the stake was 60% Telcom, and then 40% Vodafone Kenya Limited. But then Vodafone Kenya Limited, 12.5% of that, which technically is 5% of the overall Safaricom shares, was with this entity Mobitelia. And the Public Investment Committee also cited some of faulted the way Mobitelia came into the picture. So that was there. Even before, in the run-up to the Safaricom IPO, that one was flagged. It became a big issue. So you find that, yes, it may not necessarily be individual departmental committees coming up with analysis of the report, but we have the Public Investment Committee, Public Accounts Committee, which might not be able to dwell on on all the state corporations based on the audited results, but based on in the work with financial years, look at all the state corporations audited results, and then they give their findings.
Okay, you wanted to say something, Irongo?
No, I was just talking about the audit, which the Auditor General, so it's under the Section 62, which is on accounts and audit, and which then refers to the Public Accounts Audit Act, which again extends all the powers of the Auditor General.
Section 62.
Yes, Section 62. So then the
authority shall maintain updated records of which privatization undertaken under this Act.
Under this Act, Section 2.
Subsection 2.
No, I just have 62.
Yeah, which...
It doesn't go to subsections. And this is the act that was signed by the President. I assent.
The act. So it is section.
So perhaps we have different versions of the law.
I don't know.
The one I have is,
you need to
know
know
the one that has Velam at the start?
The Velam.
That's what
Then this seems to have been lost actually on the floor of the House, because if you look at what Parliament had published before, there was a subsection 2.
Yeah.
There's none.
Yeah.
I mean,
so,
I
now,
could show it to you.
In fact, now,
Yeah.
that gives us now the challenge, because subsection 2 of that 62,
Yeah.
that was in the original bill,
Yeah.
had a subsection 2 that provided what Irungu was saying: the accounts of the authority shall be audited in accordance with the Public Audit Act.
And I'm telling you, it's not there. So what was assented to by the president does not have that.
So my point is, you can see now the challenges that we are having. Because this one was bringing the Auditor General. That is what was in the bill.
Yeah.
But then what, I don't know whether even this has been published in the Kenya Law Reform, because we've not found it. So this one seems to have been lost, which makes the situation even worse.
Do you have section 63? What does it say?
Now 63 goes on miscellaneous provisions.
Because mine tells me, no matter or action that by a member of the board or by any officer, employee or agent of the authority shall, if the matter or action is done in good faith, in the execution of the functions, powers or duties of the authority under this act, render the member, officer, employee or agent personally liable to any action, claim or demand.
Yes. Now, that was moved from section 65 in the original bill now to the current section 63. So there have been a lot of movements between what went into Parliament and now what was now assented that particular morning.
Okay. That particular morning. Now, beyond this, obviously the government has been looking for money. So we agreed that whatever is generated from, let's say, an initial public offering would go to the consolidated fund.
Yeah.
Meaning it's available to provide whatever services, including free primary education.
Yeah.
Now, the government has also been looking at different ways of sourcing for revenue, including the securitization that has really generated hit from unlikely quarters. I don't know that he's your member of parliament, Dean Dinyoro, in Kiharo constituency. What is your view of that, the securitization? Because you've been in the transport and road sector, that now we are told the roads construction is back. How does it look like when you have to look at the accumulation of debt, declared, not declared, hanging in somewhere?
I think securitization is a globally accepted way of raising funds. What it does is it takes away future cash flows.
Yeah.
So that is a reality that anybody who's pushing for it needs to understand. So that's why by increasing the levy from 7 to 14 and then taking away the 7, it means that it will never be available until that full securitization has been paid. And that said, because of the other your point on raising of the funds, and that this process is actually for exactly that, I think we need to look at it from both that we need to raise funds, but also from a strategic point and where the Kenyans get value. If you think about it, if you look at KPC, for example, 90% of all the fuel that is lands in Kenya goes through the KPC, and so it's actually a strategic asset for the government. By sale, I saw that they're looking to sell about 65% to raise about 120 billion. Yeah. So I don't know where they got the number if the valuation has not yet been done. But you can think of why would you sell an entire 65%? Seems too large at the beginning. And if you look at the Kenyans, they were selling 30%, and all the Safaricom, what was floated was 25%. So it feels that it is too big. And if you look at the equivalent, Safaricom today, if you sell 10% of Safaricom, you get the exact same amount of money, about 118, 120 billion based on the price today. So, which would be an easier sale. Probably it will take us about 2-3 weeks, a month to actually actualize that sale. But should we go the direction of the KPC? Yeah. For me, I feel that 65% is too high. Then when I think of, there is a case study that we had done back then on BP, the British Petroleum. And when Winston Churchill decided to sell it just after the war to fund some of those expenditures that they had because it was owned by the government, they retained what was called a golden share. Yeah, the golden share then allows, even if you do not have the shareholding. You've sold 65%, meaning that you do not have a majority. Somebody else does have the majority. The golden share allows you to actually make decisions and even have vetoes on areas that are of sovereign importance, like maybe getting into certain debt, getting into certain partnerships, conducting business in a certain way. So that can be defined so that even if the government has sold that asset to another party, the government still retains certain authorities and power that nobody else has. Of course, that is not entrenched or incorporated within the Privatization Act, but certainly at the structuring point of the transaction, that can be introduced.
Yeah.
But 65% for me seems too high.
Okay. Churchill, so as you speak about this, like you're saying, you sell KPC, it's been giving us a bit of revenue to also finance the programs of the government. Now it will no longer be available, but yes, you have sort of a boom payment because of the sale. What does it do to our ability to finance government operations sustainably, even as we take all these loans in the name of securitization, which is sort of saying that we may never do extra things apart from what the current government thinks?
Yeah, it's debatable, and there's some people who are agreeing actually to the concerns that you raise. But if you look at the positives that has been put on the table around the privatization, because the idea is now to sell up to 65% of KPC shares. The last profits that now were dividends now submitted to Government of Kenya was around 6.9 billion. So the idea is that even with the privatization, there could be some efficiency because you introduce, you'll change some of the management, some of the board constitution will be reconstituted to bring in place some of the people who are at least much better competent, some efficiency gains. And so the idea, if you look at it from the positive flip of privatization, is now to be able to increase this dividend. So yes, in as much as the GOK is ceding 65%, it will still remain with 35%, and that's pretty much the same stake that it has in Safaricom. But now the idea is now to grow this pie from the 6.9 billion. So even if it increases the profits because of the new reconstitution of the management and the board, probably it may be able to be more profitable. So that's the idea. Okay. How it will work out is a totally different idea, that notwithstanding. So so that is the positive of that. So still GOK, Government of Kenya will still receive dividends, probably at 6.9%, but at a lower ownership stake at 35%. So if you look at securitization, the idea or the flip side to it is because you're looking at some of these funds that ideally are what you call appropriation in aid. Because if you look at the Petroleum Development Levy Fund, is now appropriation in aid that is now within the petroleum sector. If you look at the sports fund, is also within the sports fund. But now the idea with securitization, because ultimately the underlying ministry, State Department will receive these monies, be it the Petroleum Development Levy, be it also the sports fund, the monies that goes into that fund, and now to utilize it over each and every financial year. So you find that appropriation in aid from these monies is now used by the underlying ministry or State Department. So when securitization comes in, it's like rather than having the monies you'll be getting in the next 10 years, to each and every year you'll be building a tenth of the project that you want to build over 10 years. Why don't you just build a project right now, and then all these monies that come in, be it the Petroleum Development Levy, be it the sports fund, now you will sort of now package it and now securitize it. So that's the idea around securitization. But a number of things needs to be in place to ensure that it works out, because you need to ring fence these monies such that it is properly utilized. For instance, we have the Talanta bond has been securitized for 4 billion. Yes. And then the monies that goes into sports fund is now supposed to pretty much retire or to settle the obligations that has been securitized over the next 15 years. So the thing is, if there's some tweaks in a legislation, because the money that gets into the sports fund ultimately comes from the betting levies, betting taxes. Yeah. So there could be some tweaks further down the line which now sort of cripple the sports fund, and how it will not be able to pay the obligations for the securitization. So that's one which needs to be done, and also which we didn't see even with with that particular securitization for sports fund, is that they had specified like 35% of what goes to the sports fund is what now needs to go towards developing sports projects in the country. But now we have like the entire sports fund now has been ring-fenced through what you call a special purpose vehicle, and then after that it's like that's been given the priority. So it's like now, out of, rather than 35% that's supposed to go towards development projects as per the Sports Fund Act as it is, we now see that it's now the entire monies that goes there being securitized. So that becomes problematic because it less wiggle room. So probably some of these levies were just there temporarily, but now we're seeing that over the next 15 years we'll still remain with them. Okay. Yeah.
Now, Alex, I have less than a minute. Your take on all those issues, especially on the fact that the current administration determines a lot of what happens in the next a couple of years, running into 15 years.
Okay, my take on this is we are tying future administrations and Kenyans to some policies that are being passed now. For instance, the securitization of the fuel levy, now sports fund, and others that we've had on the way, means that any other administration that comes, you cannot reverse those particular policies. There are some of these policies that Kenyans are not happy with, and the hope is at some point they will be reversed. For instance, the housing levy. If it is securitized now, it means any other administration that comes, unless you find a way of offloading that debt in another means, you have to continue with that levy because it is tied to some debt. The problem we have, we are tying future generations to expenditures that happened in the past. Like the securitization of the 175 billion of fuel levy went into paying pending bills. So it means whatever we are doing, we are spending money that we have not received yet for activities that we did a long time ago. This one has a challenge because it adds on to our debt burden. And when I look at the macro fiscal outlook in the coming year presented in the budget paper, it doesn't paint a good picture. Right now we have a deficit of 923 billion, close to a trillion, and it might cross a trillion by the end of the financial year. But next year is not any better. And that is seeing a lot of domestic borrowing happening, crowding out the private sector. Right now, private lending is at 2.2% of GDP, having come down from a high of 13-point-something% by December of 2023. That means we are seeing a shrinking of the resources that are available to the private sector. The non-performing loans are at an all-time high of 17.3%. These are about 717 billion that private sector is not in a position to pay. This will have a dire effect on the banking sector and the economy at large. All right.
I think what we'll do, we'll get you back because there's still many issues that we haven't discussed. We'll break them down further, talk about the future of public finance in this country, but also the challenges that Kenyans continue to report. I hope you don't mean it, that housing levy is going to be securitized.
From what we've seen with Talanta and fuel levy, we can only wait and see.
So there's no official paper that you've seen?
No, there's no official paper, but it's
we will live with that hope.
It's a hope.
So let me quickly take a look at the feedback that has come to us at Citizen TV Kenya. Sam Gichuk, the hashtag to use is Citizen Daybreak on what Kenyans are saying in regards to the conversation of the morning. Do you have the feedback? Yeah. So this is Rumaz. Why all the rush about the privatization law? It seems some people in government want to privatize some government corporations in order to buy it through proxies. We know they are shadowy deals, something sinister about the privatization law. Next is Frank Orinde. Privatization law, is it genuine reform or a quiet handover of public assets to private hands? Transparency and accountability must come first. Kenyans deserve to know who benefits and at what cost. Then Sanixon Dugre, when you create self-centered and biased laws, they disproportionately favor certain individuals or groups over others. This undermines the principle of impartiality, leading to systemic inequality and eroding public trust in the legal system. What else do you say? Bobotiano, the privatization law is flawed because it gives the Treasury CS unilateral powers which may lead to abuse of the law. For example, the privatization of Kenya Pipeline has been initiated without public participation. Okay. That's the feedback this morning. Thank you so much, Irungo. Thank you so much, Alex. And thank you so much, Churchill, for making time for us to have this conversation. That's our time. Up next is Matters Health and Lifestyle. My name is Sam Gituku. See you again soon.